Hey everyone, welcome back to the Amplified Training channel. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to thank you all so much for helping us reach over 100 subscribers. Your support means a lot to me. Follow me on Instagram as amplified.training. And if you're interested in one-to-one coaching, shoot me a DM. The odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. With that being said, let's dive into Conjugate. So when it comes to Conjugate, I think one of the best things we can do is define both what it is and is not. Let's start with what it isn't. When most people think Conjugate, they immediately go to the Westside barbell system, which, hey, there's a reason why Louis Simmons was a mad genius. The problem there is they get caught up on things such as banded speed work, chains, crazy barbell variations, using all sorts of specialty bars. When at day's end, what Conjugate training is concurrent training, which means you attempt to improve multiple aspects of your fitness at once, such as strength, muscle size, conditioning, and technique. So again, all Conjugate programs are concurrent, and most concurrent programs are conjugate in nature. So don't conflate the two with thinking it's just the Westside barbell method. What I'm going to show you today is my iteration and how I adapt Conjugate. But let's dive a little bit further into what makes Conjugate, and that is the 3-effort system. At its core, the Westside iteration of Conjugate relies on 3 different efforts. The first one is the max effort method, which most of you are familiar with, and this is taking a variation of your competition lift to usually a 1-rep maximum. The idea here is you are training to strain, you're learning how to grind through lifts, and the variations are picked to help address weak points. For example, if you have a weak lockout in your bench press, you might opt for a close grip bench to a 1-rep maximum. Next up is the dynamic effort method, and this is speed work, and this is generally done with bands or chains. And the idea here is this helps overload the top end of the range of motion. As Westside was a geared gym, you'll find that geared lifters tend to focus more on the top end, top half of a movement. And the purpose is to allow for coding high intensity, high threshold work where you're really accelerating every rep with intention while also helping to shed fatigue overall because the bottom half or the harder part of the movement tends to be lighter as a result of that. Additionally, it can help improve technique and speed. And then the last part is the repetitive effort method. And essentially, this is your bodybuilding or muscle mass, hypertrophy work, whatever you want to call it, because bigger muscles have more strength potential, and having more muscle mass will help you control the weight better 9 times out of 10. It's very rare that a bigger engine slows down the car, after all. Now that we've had a brief overview of Conjugate in the 3-effort system, let's dive into how I change it and break the rules. First and foremost, we'll talk about the max effort method, and the big change I make here is I start off by not changing variations every week. It's more common, you'll see it in Conjugate templates, where the variation is changed every week. The idea there is to change pressure gradients across the joints, introduce more variety and variation, and help keep training fresh, novel, just creating a new stimulus for the body. However, what I've found is 3 to 6 week waves of the same movement tends to be more beneficial for most people as it gives you more time to touch the movement and get practice with it. Your first week with the movement, you probably don't have your technique dialed in if it's one you've never trained on, or it's a wildly different variation or an incredibly weak variation. If you get a few more weeks with it, you'll be able to practice with it and develop your skill with it, which in turn means you can extract more benefit out of that exercise. Next up, as far as repetition maximums, it'll be anywhere from a 1 to 10 rep max, depending on the lifter's goals as well as equipment availability. Doing something like a 1 rep max dumbbell bench press is going to be a lot more difficult than something such as a 10 rep max, or if they have access to heavy enough dumbbells for that application. Additionally, I'll generally have max effort sets be in the 5 to 8 rep range. And the reason why is this is a bit of a holdover from my strongman background, where if you look at that sport, a lot of the time, the sport has you doing events for repetitions with a heavy weight, and that 5 to 8 rep range is a really good area to hang out. And then I usually, after that heavy set of 5 to 8, we might drop 20% and then do another rep out set just to build that work capacity, as well as build a little bit more muscle mass. I really like using back off sets in a Conjugate method again, just to get more time with that main lift and extract more benefit from it. I'll also use a mechanical progression scheme where, for example, weeks 1 through 5, we might use a snatch grip deficit deadlift, going from a 5 to 1 rep max across the weeks. Weeks 6 to 10, we then move into a deficit deadlift. And in weeks 11 through 15, we would then proceed into a standard deadlift from the floor. The idea here being with every successive variation, you are actually reducing the range of motion and getting in a more mechanically powerful position. This is just one example of how we go about adjusting the max effort method. And in the next slide, I'll dive a bit further. Here we've got 2 examples of max effort waves. The first one is a 3-week power building wave where you'd work up to a 10 RM, drop 20% for 2 sets of 10 to 15, 8 RM, drop 20% for 2 sets of 10 to 15 again, and then a 6 RM, drop 20% for 2 sets of 8 to 12, and your movement here might be the 30-degree dumbbell incline, for example. This would be really good for the athlete who's trying to build upper body mass, or maybe doesn't have access to a barbell, or just can't spot safely, again, great power building wave. On the other side of that, what we have here is a 5-week strength and skill wave. This is something that would be designed for an athlete who is front squatting and they're really trying to learn their technique and master the movement. Week 1, we do a 1 rep max, drop it 20% for 3 sets of 3 regular reps. Week 2, we do a 3 rep max, drop it by 10% for 4 sets of 4 with pauses. Then week 3, we would repeat the week 1 workout where it's the heavy single, 3 by 3 regular reps. Week 4, we go back to the 3 rep max, followed by the pause reps. And then in week 5, the idea here is you've had 4 weeks of practice, both with reps, singles, regular reps, and pause reps. So then by week 5, you should be able to hit a really strong and confident PR. You can see how the weeks build into one another. Additionally, this shows an example of fatigue management where you're not just grinding out a 1 rep max every week, because in weeks 2 and 4, you're naturally going to go lighter due to the repetitions, as well as the paused nature of the back off sets. But they also help with control. What I want to show you here is an example of a slightly longer term max effort wave. It's a 6-week program. And the idea here is you're sticking with the same variation for 6 weeks, as I am a big fan of that. In this case, we're using a competition variation, as this was written for a strongman athlete of mine who recently took 7th place at nationals and broke the 600-pound deadlift barrier while weighing under 190 pounds. The idea with this here is we're going to manage fatigue, because if you look, there are no max effort sets truly except for weeks 1 and 6, where in week 1 we had a heavy single, and we use that to set the percentages for weeks 2 through 5, working in a slightly higher intensity range, letting the athlete get multiple touches and just develop positioning and technique with the bar. That way, by the time week 6 rolls around, they're likely going to be able to get over their old 1 rep max for a set of 2, as we were prepping for a 4 reps event at nationals. Moving on to the dynamic effort method, this is probably where I make the biggest change to Conjugate. In general, I throw it out the window. I don't use speed work with the vast majority of my clientele, and instead I focus on what I call developmental waves. And the idea here is the developmental waves allow us to focus on different attributes that I feel the athlete either needs or wants to focus on, depending on where they're at in their training cycle, as well as their overall goals. That said, even at Westside, you will see stuff like a dynamic effort cycle get thrown out in favor of a 5x5 cycle for a lifter who needs to build a little bit more muscle mass. And lastly, you will see speed work on occasion in my programs, depending on the athlete's needs, as a means of helping control fatigue and recovery, while also getting them maybe a little bit more frequency with a specific lift. Here are a few examples of developmental cycles that I've run with either myself or for my athletes in the past. On the far left, we have a 5-week speed and control cycle where you'd start with paused repetitions and then move into speed repetitions. I really like this for front squats myself, as I found it's great for my rack position and my control, as I have a bit of stability issues with the front squat. In the middle there is a 3-week power building cycle, 3x10, 4x8, 5x6. And then to the far right, we have a 5-week skill and fatigue single cycle where you do 8 triples at 75%, and then singles at 80%, 85%, and the last one being somewhere between 90 to 92% in week 1. I'm not going to go over every individual week. You can screenshot this if you'd like. The idea here, though, is instead of just focusing on speed, we use these different ways to focus on what the athlete needs. For example, the speed and control cycle, that might be good for an athlete to use for front squats while they're really trying to push their deadlift, as it allows them to work on their leg drive as well as stability in the position. The power building cycle, that's a good developmental wave for an athlete who's focused on building muscle mass. And the skill and fatigue single cycle, that'd be a really good technique option for an athlete who's doing something such as a log clean and press, as it allows them a lot of volume at a slightly higher intensity, as well as working fatigue singles, which I find are great for building technique under fatigue, as well as getting the athlete out of their head and not having them hyperfixate and cue themselves into paralysis by analysis. With any of these waves, we probably have you use 90% of a 1 rep max to set your percentages for the various weeks. And then after a successful wave, you could add anywhere between 5 to 20 pounds and run them on repeat, all depending on your goals and where you're at in your training calendar. Now, I did want to touch briefly on speed work. As I said earlier, I do generally tend to throw it out the window for most people. However, in specific occasions, it is great for peaking as a recovery and fatigue management tool, since it still codes hard, explosive reps, but you're not going to generate as much fatigue since it is lighter at the bottom. You'll keep the intensity much lower. If you're not using accommodating resistance, you should use around 60 to 75% of your 1 rep max. Or preferably, you'd want to be 50 to 65% of your 1 rep max with an additional 10 to 15% coming from bands or chains. I really prefer to do speed work with accommodating resistance, and the reason why is without it, your body will naturally tend to decelerate a rep over the top because it doesn't want to tear anything. Having the accommodating resistance still codes that hard drive through the entire rep. A couple examples of the accommodating resistance or dynamic effort weight even without one would be as follows. You could do 12 sets of 2 at 50% plus another 15% in chains, 10 singles at 70%, or 9 triples at 55% plus another 10% of your 1RM in bands. As far as the repetitive effort method goes, there's really not too much to discuss here. In general, just find bodybuilding means and methods that you like for your accessory work and train hard. I personally don't reach for stuff like 3x8 to 12 in general, as I find it very boring. I don't track. There's no intensity, nor is there intention when I do that work. Whereas if I opt for something such as a rest pause, a top set back off method, or total reps, I'm a lot more aggressive going into that work rather than kind of phoning it in, which is a common problem for a lot of lifters. A few of my personal favorites are to hit a heavy set of 5 to 8, drop 20% for a set of 10 to 15, and then take half of that heavy top set to failure. 8 sets of 8 with 30 seconds rest, adding weight when I can hit 64 total reps across those sets and obey the rest period. Then a 5-set single rest pause method. So it'll be max reps, rest 30, max reps, rest 30, max reps, rest 30, max reps, rest 30, and then max reps one more time. And if I get 40 or more reps across those 5 clusters, then I go heavier next time. The myo match is really similar to rest pause, except on the first set, what you'll do is you'll hit your given number anywhere between 12 and 20, and then you'll do 2 additional rest pause sets, taking as many clusters with 30 seconds rest as you need to match the initial set. So let's say the first set you hit 20 reps, set 2, you hit 15 reps, rest, 3 reps, rest, then 2 reps, you've matched. Then the third set, you try to match again. And with the third set, if you can hit the match in 3 or fewer clusters, time to go heavier next time. Or if you're breaking 20 reps on set 1, that's just a personal preference. Again, this is relatively arbitrary because muscle growth is equated pretty much equal anywhere between sets of 5 to 30 when you match effort. So pick a number you like, except for sets of 7, that's a little weird. And then the last one I'll often reach for is 3 sets with 50 reps total. Set 1 might be 10 reps. Set 2 could be 15, and then set 3 could be 25, in which case I've earned a load progression. Whereas if I go 20, 10, 10, that's 40 reps, no weight increase. Again, with repetitive effort, don't overthink it. Just find methods that you're really going to attack progression on. Whether it be 4 sets of 8, rest, pause, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter versus how hard you're working and how much you try to chase progression. Next up, let's talk about your training split. Traditionally, max effort, you have a lower and upper max effort day and then a lower and upper dynamic effort day. So that's a 4-day training week. However, there's a few alternative splits you can run because, again, we're adapting the system to you as a lifter. For example, 3 days a week, you could go a lower max effort, upper max effort, and then a full body, either developmental or dynamic effort day. A strongman split could be a lower max day, upper max day, lower dynamic, plus moving and loading events, and then an upper developmental day. Or even if you wanted to get a little crazy, you could do a 4 times a week arm specialization phase where it'd be a lower max, upper max, a full body developmental day, and then a day focused on pull plus biceps. This is sort of a pseudo bro split, and I've got a few unique splits that we'll be diving into later in the video. Okay, it's later in the video, so here are the splits we're going to be going over. We're going to have both a 4 and 3 times a week strongman off-season program, a 3 times a week conjugate program focused on the glutes and hamstrings, hence the Conjugate Method. And then the last one is probably illegal. It is a 3 times a week conjugate bro split where we're going to go legs, push, pull. First off will be our 4 times a week strongman off-season program. And with all these programs, I'll talk a little bit about the lifter and whom it's designed for. Our lifter profile here is they don't have much upper body muscle mass. Their dip and drive mechanic needs work for their push press. They have a very strong deadlift, a sloppy rack position. Their general pressing is just very weak, and they need conditioning overall. And how we go about training them, day 1, that's going to be lower intensive. We'll start with a deficit deadlift, 5 to 8 rep max, drop 20% for a set of 10 to 15. A Zercher split squat for 4 sets of 6 to 8. A lat pull down. I love doing vertical pulls after lower body work. This helps stretch out the low back a little bit. We'll use the 8x8 method. A sled drag where we'll use the 8x8 method, but instead of 8 reps, it becomes 80 feet. And then a side plank for 3 rounds of 30 to 45 seconds each side. We're using the 8x8 method quite a bit with this lifter as it's going to keep them working quickly, intensively, and help bump that conditioning just a little bit. Upper intensive day, we're going to use a behind the neck shoulder press, and we're just going to add 2 back off sets rather than 1 because they need a little bit more upper body volume because they are weaker there. Then a Swiss bar floor press. We're using, again, that same intensive approach, 5 to 8, drop 20%. 2 sets of dips for 10 to 15 repetitions. A myo match face pull, and then JM press at the end for 3 sets of 10 to 12. I like to put movements such as JM press or skull crushers more towards the end of a workout, just so those elbows are nice and warmed up. Then we move into our developmental days, and this is where the programming tends to get a little more in depth. And the reason why is we pick developmental cycles that will help address the lifter's weak points. So for example, we're using the speed and control cycle from earlier where we do the pause reps and then the speed reps with the front squat. This will help improve their leg drive as well as their dip and drive mechanics because we're going to help improve their sloppy rack position by focusing on the front squat. Then we'll go into a beltless safety squat bar good morning, a row of choice for the 8x8 method, lat pull down 8x8, and shrugs 8x8 to help build their upper back. A strong upper back in Strongman helps you better with everything. Positioning in the deadlift, loading, carrying, as well as strengthening the upper back so that they don't cave in a rack position, which this lifter has a weak point in. Then for their developmental pressing cycle, we're going to do an axle push press from the rack, and we're going to pause in the dip to help reinforce a good position there. I like using the axle to teach leg drive as opposed to the log for the strongman athlete, because once you learn the skill of leg drive, it's easier to transfer it over to the log, which is a more difficult implement to really master leg drive on due to how awkward it is. And then again, adding in the pause dip, really good for just improving positioning. Then we'll do a log strict press for 3 sets of 5 to 8, a rest pause rope hammer curl, some decline skull crushers for sets of 10 to 12, and then a rest pause set of tricep press downs. And this is just one sample week, and that's how all these programs are going to be done. So you can see how we pick movements that play to the lifter's strength, making sure that we don't lose that, while using the developmental days and the hypertrophy work to target what we feel are weak links. Now here is our 3 times a week strongman off season, and for our lifter here, he is a very explosive presser. The deadlift is improving but needs work. They're great at moving events, fantastic conditioning levels. Overall, we just need more static strength for this lifter, and they're also going to be moving up a weight class, and they're on 3 days a week. So for lower intensive, we'll hit a heavy set of 5 to 8, drop 20%, and then do 12 to 20. And the idea here is 20 rep squats are an amazing mass builder. They build great leg strength, and it will also help spark a little hunger in this lifter, so they'll probably eat a bit more to help them move up in weight classes. Safety squat good mornings after that, safety bar split squats, an 8-minute density block of chin-ups, and a rest pause set of hamstring curls. Then our next day is upper intensive. We'll hit a 10 RM on a close grip axle bench, and then we'll repeat that same weight for 3 additional sets of 5 to 8. I love using an axle for bench pressing. It's a little easier on the elbows, and you also get a bit more tricep recruitment. So something worth considering if you do have access to one. Then we'll move into a 60-degree dumbbell incline press using a rest pause method there. Then a seal row and shrug superset where they'll do 10 to 12 rows and then 12 to 15 shrugs. Really good for loading up that upper back. A rolling tricep extension to a heavy 20, repeating the weight for 2 sets of 12 to 15. And then a rear delt swing to a heavy 30, repeating the weight for 2 sets of 15 to 20. Then lastly is our developmental day where we're going to do a log clean and press wave, where week 1 they might go 6 sets of 5, week 2 8 sets of 4, and then week 3 10 triples. And because they're very much a dynamic presser, we don't need to focus too much on adding a lot of technique work. We just need to keep them familiar with the movement. And the log clean and press is a marquee event in strongman for a reason. Then after that, we would do a paused deficit deadlift where we're going to be using the skill and fatigue singles cycle. So they do their not their rep work, but their developmental work, and then some heavy optional singles thereafter based off how they're feeling. The reason for the paused deficit deadlift is this is a great movement for improving a lifter's starting position, as well as their hip height and bar path overall. Just a good Swiss Army knife deadlift developer. While we add muscle mass to them on the other days, this will help improve everything across the board. Then we do a rest pause set with a T-bar row, a lat pull down with 3 sets, 50 rep goal, and then an axle curl to a heavy 5 to 8, drop 20% for 10 to 15, and then 50% to failure. And you can see how we're using slightly more bodybuilding oriented means and methods for this lifter while still controlling the volume since they are on 3 days a week. All right, next up is 3 times a week Conjugate Method. The lifter is focusing on their glutes and hamstrings. They're also really heavily focused on body composition. They prefer a dense workout, brisk pace, circuit training, and they love getting a pump and getting sore. We're going to accommodate that. Day 1, lower intensive. We'll start with Bulgarian split squats because once you get those out of the way, your day can only get better for 3 sets of 5 to 8. Then a hip thrust to a 15 repetition maximum for 2 additional sets of 8 to 12. And then with that, what you'll do is on those back off sets, every rep you're going to do 3 lengthened partials at the top just to get a good extra bit of squeeze on those glutes. Then we're going to do a circuit, 4 rounds of 6 glute ham raises, Nordic hamstring curls or RDLs depending on low back fatigue, 12 hamstring leg curls, and then 25 kettlebell swings to help blitz the posterior chain as well as get that heart rate up, work the conditioning a bit. Again, our athlete here, they love dense workouts, they love circuits, they love pump, soreness. They're very much love the sensation of a good workout. Day 2, upper intensive. We'll start with a chest supported row to a heavy 10, repeating the weight for 2 sets of 6 to 10 thereafter. A shoulder press to a 10 rep max, drop 20%, 2 sets of 15 to 20. Then we'll do a circuit 4 rounds of 6 dumbbell floor presses, 12 skull crushers, and 25 tricep press downs. Really, again, smashing the back of the arms, getting an insane pump in those triceps. They'll be nice and sore. Day 3 is our full body developmental day, and we're going to do a 4-round circuit consisting of 10 goblet squats, 8 to 12 lat pull downs or chin ups to failure, and then dips for a set of 12 to 15. Then we'd move into the abduction/adduction machine, doing both for a rest pause set and then a rest pause set of curls. And you'll see here we keep true to that 3-day week format of lower, upper, and full body, but we've really adapted this one because now we're using circuits, we're using compound sets, and even the movement selection, it's very dialed into the specific lifter. Our final split today, and this one's probably illegal, please don't call the cops on me. Our lifter loves intensity. They prefer shorter workouts, they like a brisker pace, and they live for the soreness and just being in that moment of grunting and straining out those reps. This is the 3 days a week, conjugate bro split, legs, push, pull. I like separating legs and pull day as much as you can just to help manage low back fatigue rather than the typical, push-pull legs where you're doing back the day before legs. Just a personal preference. I think that this manages total stress on the body better across a week. So let's dive in. Week 1. This is our lower intensive day. They're going to hit a heavy 20 rep max on the leg curl, repeating the weight for 2 sets of 10 to 15. Then they're going to do a safety bar squat to a heavy 5, drop 20% for 3 sets of 6 to 8, 1 and 1/2 reps. So that's all the way down, halfway up, back down, all the way up equals 1 rep. The reason we're starting with leg curls in this sample here is it's a great way to help reduce knee strain. A little trick I stole from John Meadows, rest in peace. Then we'll do 2 sets of 8 to 10 Romanian deadlifts, then walking lunges for 2 sets of 8 to 10. And just so y'all know, if there's ever a single-sided exercise and it says reps, that's reps on both sides, not just total. So if it says 2 sets of 8, that's 8 reps per side, not 4 each side. Then after the lunges, we'll do a rest pause set for the leg press, very high intensity day. Day 2, upper intensive. We'll take an incline bench at 30 degrees to a 5 to 8 rep max, drop 20% for 10 to 15, half of that top set to failure. Then we'll do a machine shoulder press of choice, rest pause, an upright row, myo match, press down to a heavy 20, then repeat that weight for a set of 12 to 15, and then body weight skull crushers, a 100 rep gauntlet. And if you're unfamiliar with that, that's just where you're going to take something like the Smith machine, put the bar at about sternum height, lower as you get stronger across the weeks, and you'll just come into it and do skull crushers, 100 total reps. Then week 3, this is pull day. There's no full body developmental day here. And the reason why pull day becomes developmental is I find this just slots in really nicely. So we'll start with our chest supported row, 5 to 8 RM, minus 20% for 10 to 15, and then half of that top set to failure, 3 sets of max reps chin-ups, then the Meadows row using the 8x8 method here. And because it is a single-sided exercise, no 30 seconds rest. Do 8 on one side, switch sides, 8 on the other, back and forth. You're gonna get a really good pump, really good burn, and you're gonna be sweating. You're gonna be really in the moment, right? Then rear delt swings, 3 sets with a 50 rep goal. And then last but not least, an easy bar curl using that 100 rep gauntlet method for an insane pump. If you're only hitting a muscle group 1 time per week, you need to hit it very hard. And this is how you do it in a conjugate framework. Again, please don't call the cops on me. If you're still with me, thank you for making it this far. Let's just kind of go over everything we talked about today. Conjugate training at day's end is a means of concurrent training, which is to develop multiple attributes at once, such as strength, muscle, skill, and conditioning. You don't need a ton of fancy specialty equipment. Getting creative is actually a great way to make the method more enjoyable and effective. And that is really the crux of conjugate for me. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it is the most optimal, 100% best, efficient way to train. However, it's extremely enjoyable, I find, for most people. And workouts that you enjoy, that you focus on attacking progress on, and will stick to, are the ones that tend to work best in the long run. I'll always trade a little bit of optimal for a large degree of enjoyable. With your intensive days, these are either your limit strength development days or they're super high intensity muscle building days, depending on where you're at in your focus and training. And then developmental days either tend to be skill days, volume emphasis days, or speed emphasis days. Also, which one of these programs should I go ahead and turn into an ebook? I'm going to have a poll linked down in the description below. And if I can get 20 likes on this video, the poll will determine which program will be back here for another video that I'll be due up as a full-length one. Lastly, thank you all so much for watching, and there will be a link as well in the description to the slides for this presentation if you'd like a copy for yourself. Until next time, stay safe and have a great time.